Today, Paul is going to share an update on farm finance and ag policy. Your slides look great, Paul, so go ahead.
Yep, I'm on it. All right. Thanks. What I'm going to actually talk a little bit on the crop progress and conditions, but really going to focus in on prevented plant, and then a little bit on the farm bill status. So we've seen some of this stuff, and really what I want to show, last year we had this drought, and I think we've heard this, and I really want to point you to is not what's happening in Wisconsin. It seems to be over, is this band across eastern Iowa, across the I-states and into Ohio. And this on the right is one you haven't seen yet. It's the drought or the weather forecast, drought forecast from June 20th to September 30th. And you see that big band across the eastern Iowa, across central Illinois and Indiana and Ohio. That's what's going to be attracting some attention, as well as the floods and where we are. But you can really see the drought is essentially over here. This is something I just found, and I found this extremely interesting. This is if you take the 3.5 weeks from May 31st until June 23rd, and take that amount of rainfall and rank it from the most to the least. Number one is the most rainfall seen in 132 years, and the 132 is the least, or the least rainfall. What you quickly see is these crop reporting districts across southern Minnesota, north and western Iowa up there in South Dakota and across. That's the most rain we've seen in that 3.5 week period ever in 132 years. You can see most of Wisconsin is in the upper part. And then you see how dry it is over in the Carolinas, but even in that area across the I-states, 105, 115, 115, 113, that's the pretty dry relative to last 132 years. And that's what's kind of been really driving people is to worry about. Is it going to be too wet or too dry? Somewhere in the middle, it's just right, I guess. Crop progress, we've kind of seen these, and what I want to show here is it's generally been fine at the national level. We've been right on the 5-year average for corn planting, a little behind for the soybean planting, but this is what I want to draw your attention to. On the left is corn, and on the right, and really with these planting, I'm really focusing just on the planting progress curves. You see how they just flies along at the 5-year average there, the dashed line, and then late May, it starts to bend over, and we get slower and slower and slower. Same thing happens in soybean on the right here. We're way ahead of average. We're falling back. And all of a sudden, about late May, again, we start to slow down. We're at about that 5-year average. It's really slowing down. That is when it starts going horizontal, it means nothing's happening. And that's what's happened. Everything's slowed down. And we've run into late planting and prevented planting. So this little graphic here is the planting period, the late planting period, and prevented plant. That's what crop insurance thinks about. And we've crossed the final planting date, and we're in this late planting period for all of our corn and soybeans here in Wisconsin, and we're in the prevented plant area. And so these vary a little bit here. We'll look at these pictures, but just remember we're in the late planting period and it's prevented plant. These are the dates here. All of these have passed. I'm going to slide back a slide. These are these dates right here in the middle. We have crossed over the final planting date. On the left is corn for grain is the top number, and the bottom number or date is corn for silage. On the right is soybeans. Everything is in the late planting period for crop insurance perspective. There is a final plant date, and these are the last dates you can plant these crops and still insure them. You can see grain is done in Wisconsin. Corn for silage, you can still do it in the southern 2/3 here till June 30th. Soybean, we've got till July 5th and 10th. So we're in that period. I'm going to go back 2 slides. We're really getting close to the late planting period being done. We're flopping over into the late end of the late planting period. So what are the options for a farmer? They have 4 of them. They can plant it late for most of these still. You can also take a reduced prevented plant payment and then an indemnity for a reduced one or a partial one, they call it sometimes, and then plant something else. You can take the full prevented plant indemnity with some restrictions on what you do with those acres, or you can leave them uninsured and do whatever you want. And most farmers are going to take option 3. We're going to go through all of them, or the top 3, but most people are being interested in option number 3. That's why it's highlighted in red, taking the full prevented plant. If you look at this, we just put these 2 together, but the one that's, I think, most important for people that are crop consultants or ag educators is the forage options for prevented plant acres in Wisconsin in 2024. So we're going to go through these options, the first 3. In the late planting period, which is still applicable, what happens is you lose 1% of your guarantee for each day you're late. So we'll take Dane County because we're down here. That's where I'm at. Soybean final planting date was June 15th. So if I planted soybeans today, it's a nice day here. It's been wet, but today it doesn't seem like it's going to rain. That would be 11 days late on June 26th. So you lose 11% of your guarantee. Just make some nice round numbers. 60 bushel per acre guarantee is your average yield. 80% coverage level. 1155 is the initial base price. So your guarantee was 80% times 60 bushels times 1155 is 554.40 an acre. Well, if you plant it today, you're going to lose you're going to lose more than 60 bucks. You're going to lose 11% of that, and your new guarantee is only 493. Farmers rarely take this option unless they're only a few days late. Planting soybeans, just a little bit after those dates and losing 1% or 2%, okay, some are willing to take that, but they really don't like losing 11% of their guarantee, yet still paying the full premium. And when you start planting late, you're likely to have low yields, which screws up your yield history in the future. So farmers rarely take this option unless they're a few days, only if they're a day or two late. Reduced prevented plant and plant a second crop. What you can do is take a third, roughly 35% of the full indemnity. So you get a little bit, and then you plant something else. You can't plant corn late, or I'm sorry, you can't take a corn prevented plant indemnity, the partial one here, and then plant soybeans or silage on time. So, but that we've already passed that period anyway. If you plant forage, here's the key option. If you plant forage, you can manage it as a crop, as a forage crop, not as a cover crop. And we're going to look at that in a minute here. So if you want to plant forage and fertilize it and use herbicides or pesticides on it, insecticides, then you're going to have to do this reduced prevented plant indemnity. You can take it for seed or grain if you want. You can insure it and all that kind of stuff. The other thing that really hurts, though, is for the yield history. If you take these reduced prevented plant, you are automatically assigned 60% of your planted acres as yield history as the yield history for those acres that you took this partial prevented plant on. What that means is it brings down your future yield history. So again, unless it's only a few acres, farmers rarely take this option because of the yield history impacts. They don't want to have 60% of their actual yields for this year used as their yield history for calculating in the future their guaranteed level. So again, farmers rarely take this option, but the only benefit of it is you can manage the crop as a crop, not as a cover crop. The full prevented plant with the forage cover crop, what's happened is this has been changed in the last few years. So farmers might not be aware of this option, how beneficial it is now for forage. You do receive the largest indemnity. It's 55% of your guarantee. So whatever your guarantee was in dollars per acre, you're going to get 55% of that, which is pretty substantial. They do not contribute to your yield history, so you just as though you didn't plant them, and so it doesn't have any yield history effects. Here's the nice benefit. You can graze, make hay off it, make silage or haylage or bedding off it at any time. It used to be back in 2019, it used to say after November 1st. You had to wait until November 1st to do any of these activities, make hay, silage, haylage, or bedding, or graze it. Well, in this part of the country, November 1st, it's not particularly useful anymore. In 2019, they kind of said, yeah, okay, we'll go to September 1st, which it still gives you something options there, but again, it's not that great. Then in 2022, they sat and really thought about it, and they said, now that's no longer applicable. So in the last 4 years, it's changed twice, is what I'm trying to say. So now, if you take that full prevented plant indemnity, you can graze that land, you can hay it, you can make silage, haylage, or bedding off it at any time. And so that's what makes this a desirable option in our state where we have lots of opportunities for forage. You can establish alfalfa even for next year's production, and you can even insure it. What are the costs of doing this? Besides, you get the 55% of your guarantee. You got to establish a cover crop. You can have some weed control costs if you decide not to do anything. But the key, and this is the part that really is the hard part, you have to manage it as a cover crop, not as a crop, but as a cover crop. And what that really means is it kind of puts restrictions on the use of inputs. There's some USDA NRCS guidelines. If you go to this forage options publication that I talked about, I'll have it up here again in a minute, that will tell you where to go to get those options. The big thing is it can change your seeding rates. and input use and termination dates. The seeding rates, sometimes you have to use higher than you want, which raises the cost. Input use, the key is you're not going to be able to use fertilizer. You're not going to be putting herbicide or insecticides on it. You're just going to plant it as a cover crop. And then you have to terminate it eventually. But the key is that it's a cover crop. And so if you want a low cost way to get some silage or haylage off of it, you can do this, but you aren't going to be fertilizing it. You can't ever still, if you do this cover crop, you cannot harvest it for grain or seed, only for grain, grazing it, hay, making silage, haylage. And the other thing is you cannot use corn as a cover crop. Someone's always asking about that. You can't put on late planted corn and call that a cover crop. And so that's the key here. And like I said, farmers might not be aware of this. And depending on where you are in the state and what you have for neighbors, either you could use it for forage or you could sell it nearby to someone for forage, whatever you get off of it. Maybe not the highest quality forage out there, but given all the issues that we saw in those first slides about the making the first crop hay and stuff, there probably is going to be a market for some forage. The big thing is, if you're ever working with farmers on this, tell them to communicate with their agent, as their crop insurance agent is the official conduit of information. They usually recommended documenting not only your communications with your agent. So if the agent says do X and you'll be okay, then if you do X, then someone tells you later, no, that's not okay. You've got the agent, you can show the agent told you to do it, or vice versa. Basically, you want to document your communication. A phone call is great, but then what I'd say, follow up with an email. Hey, thanks for the phone call. You told me that I could do X, Y, and Z. Thank you. Let me know if this is okay in writing. And then you got it in writing as opposed to a phone call. And then same thing, documenting your practices that you do use with the photograph and showing how wet it is, how you didn't plant and things like that. Having a date on it, things like that are always helpful. These are those two pubs, and that forage options for prevented plant acres is probably the best one. It essentially tells you what you can do. It really lays out the management options there, where to go to get that information, how you can manage your prevented plant acres as a forage cover crop. The key is as a cover crop. It'll have the links to get to those documents. If you want some calculations, that's the other one.
Those links are in the chat, Paul, so perfect.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping you would do. Put them in the chat. And so that's the big thing there is if you're anybody working with farmers, yes, you can do things with them. And the key will be how much these rules have changed on things. They might not be aware of the options they did not have a couple of years ago. And so making sure they understand there are ways to do something with that acres. It's just you can't manage it as a crop. You have to manage it as a cover crop. And these documents that Kevin put in the chat will have the where to go to get that information about seeding rates and things like fertilizer. Well, generally, you're not allowed to do fertilizer. Hopefully, if there's some in the field already or something. The last thing, I'm not going to talk about the farm finance stuff. That's fine. The only thing to note is, well, I'll get to that in a second. The Farm Bill. I just thought I'd talk a little bit about farm policy. And the best way I thought, just make it one slide, is right here. Farm Doc is down in University of Illinois, and they have all these headlines. And the first one is the dates are right below them. So January 22nd, then April 9th, May 24th, June 12th, June 16th. Farm Bill could face further delays. Farm Bill remains unlikely. House Ag Committee advances contentious Farm Bill. That was in May, just about a month ago. Also, people got excited. The House got it through the committee and eventually go to the floor. But then Senate started laying out what it would like to do. But the last one for the 16th says, it's just not going to happen. Where they are agreeing is both of them talk about increasing the reference prices, or think of them as the target prices for ARC and PLC, and probably increasing the subsidy for the supplemental coverage option. It's an option for on top of your regular crop insurance. It's not used very much, but they're emphasizing it for people who want more coverage. Where they argue about things is food programs, the food stamps or SNAP benefits and school lunch programs, and then conservation programs. The Inflation Reduction Act put a bunch of money in conservation programs, and people are arguing about whether that should continue or what, and they want to offset that with cuts and stuff. So that's where the fights are about, but they both talk about increasing reference prices and the SCO options. So I'm not going to say much here, except substantial number of Wisconsin acres are likely to take prevented plant. I would tell farmers, recommend that they take the full prevented plant indemnity and grow forage to use or sell locally as a cover crop. The key is see that forage options for prevented plant acres. Farm finance conditions are softening. And what I think you'll see this fall is some interest in taking marketing assistance loans, using your harvested soybeans or harvested corn as collateral to get some low interest loans that cash flow through the fall and into spring. And when you sell your grain, then you can pay off your loan. But it's a way to help manage those costs. There's some links for that as well. Let me know. And I don't think we're going to see a new farm bill. The bill question will be, will the new Congress want to increase reference prices and the SCO subsidy? Well, we'll have to wait and see. All right, I'm done. That keeps us on time. So I'm going to escape.
Yep, Paul.